Hello, everyone. So we're talking about chapter 7 and chapter 13. I wrote a lot of notes, about 4 pages worth, excuse me. But I'm going to try to reduce the amount that I speak on chapter 7 and chapter 13. I really did enjoy chapter 13 this week. It really spoke to making sure that you have inclusivity and diversity in your research. So it, was very relevant to me and what I'm learning in my leadership program. So the posing questions were in between subject designs. What is between subject design? What is a repeated measure design? And what is response shift bias? So in between subjects design is the differences that are discovered within the analysis that can be attributed to the characteristic that is different between the comparison samples. So in the book, the posed storyline, one of the options was to collect data from students that have completed the workshop and compare them with the data collected from the students who have not participated. The question in the book, one of the prompts that I wrote, it asked, how might you best ensure rigor within Lewis's between subject design? I put that while participants were chosen randomly, I would still do a quasi-experimental research design to control the results better. And that spoke to the propensity scoring. And the benefit of propensity scoring is that researchers can be assured that through this selection, they are comparing apples to apples. So again, you may have some randomization in your participants, but making it less random and making sure that your participants are basically in the same type of group. And then research shift bias in participants who complete the same survey measure repeatedly over time. And the idea is that changes in how they respond to a measure, the change biases their data and respective analysis that rely on the data. And so there's 2 factors that the book spoke about as why this happens is, number 1, as they mature, they see the world or themselves in a different way. And number 2, they become increasingly familiar with the instrument. Chapter 13 also spoke to this, and in chapter 13, it spoke to the pre and post program testing limitations, where participants possess a desire to justify their time and effort by inflating the effects of the program in their capacities. So that instead of being honest and truthful about the results of whatever they did or participated in, they inflate it just to justify that they did have some change where there may not have been any change. And they said that especially this happens in retreats. So chapter 7 also talked about errors of inference, and type 1 and type 2 errors. Type 1, when we state relationship exists when it does not. And then type 2 is when we state there's no relationship when there actually is one. And it spoke to one way that we could have less probability of a type 1 error is to make sure that the p-value is less than 0.05. And the p-value is like the gold standard in drawing ultimate conclusions, because it indicates that there's less than 5% probability of a type 1 error. Again, the type 1 error when we state the relationship exists when it does not. So one of the key takeaways that I brought is that the less variation leads to lower p-values, and larger sample sizes lead to lower p-values. So keeping that in mind, you can increase rigor by increasing the sample size and increasing the relative variability and decreasing the irrelative variability. Again, having participants that are apples to apples. Now, chapter 13 talked about being a critical scholar, and It stated that critical scholars do not simply take on the belief of others, and they're able to judge using rigorous and relevant methods to make accurate descriptions. So, again, it was very relative to me being a person of color and a female, because it says that the field of leadership studies remains largely focused on Western perspectives, the field of business, and conceptions of masculine behavior. And women and feminine styles continue to be marginalized. So there was two things that brought out how some strategies of increasing the rigor in your leadership research. One of them was the thoroughness and making sure you have thoroughness of your concept, thoroughness of representation, and thoroughness of context. And the thoroughness of representation was a big one, where critical scholars work to ensure research samples are thoroughly representative of the populations they seek to understand and describe, and making intentional inclusions of stories that disrupt dominant perspectives. And so the second suggestion or strategy for increasing rigor was to make sure you go through the checklist when you're conducting your research. Number one, is the conceptual focus of my research inclusive and diverse? Number two, are there ways that I might design my study that are more accurately responsive to my research question? Describing strengths and potential limitations of that design. Number three, what extent does my data collection include participation from diverse backgrounds, perspectives, or identities that should be relevant? Number four is, have I reduced bias in underrepresented and marginalized population? Number five, have I described the context in which I conducted the research? And lastly, number six, have I disseminated the knowledge in ways that are accessible to the participants and those beyond academia? We touched on this a little bit in my Leadership for a Global Society, when you realize that, leadership looks different in many different cultures, and that just because we have leadership studies and research from this perspective, making sure you broaden your scope and areas of research to be inclusive and diverse. So that was chapter 7 and chapter 13 this week.